Hey everybody, Z Garcia here. Today we're taking a look at one of the latest expansions to Claim, a two-player trick-taking card game. This is Claim Reinforcements Frost. Frost here is one of three new expansions to Claim. Like I said, a fairly casual two-player trick-taking card game that already has a lot of content. Okay, the original one came out Claim, there was a sequel, Claim 2, then there were three expansions, kind of came out at the same time, and that would be Claim Maps, Claim's Mercenaries, and Claim Magic. These three here, I've covered these, go check those out if you want to hear about them. And then three new ones, Fire, Fear, and then what we're talking about here, Frost, okay? I will be doing separate videos for these as well, so go check them out. So what's in here? Well, you're going to get a few new factions. You're going to get a little supplemental extra bits that you can use to change up the game or combine it with one of the previous expansions. And you're going to get a whole lot of foiling. There's a lot of foiling. That's kind of the thing here. Foil finish. There's a lot of it. Does it work out? Are the factions fun? Let me show you on the table, and we'll come on back in just a minute. Alright, so here's what you're getting in the Frost expansion. You're going to get four factions. You're going to get Yetis over here. You're going to get these Frost Beasts. And then Ice Kings and Ice Queens, they're linked together. If you're going to use these, you have to use both together. And it's a combined deck of 22 cards. So this replaces one of the large decks, like Orcs and Goblins, for example, from the expansions. Then you're also going to get artifacts. Now, in this case, again, artifacts first showed up in this one here, Reinforcements Magic. But I don't feel that you really necessarily need this, even though they are meant to be combined with the deck that came in this one, because there are, thankfully, enough of them. The original one had 18 artifacts. Well, there's 16 in this one. This works nicely as a standalone deck of artifacts. But if you have the original one, you can shuffle them into a nice large deck of artifact cards, and it works out really well. And you'll notice these are foiled, okay? I think you can pick that up, as is everything else in here. So let's talk about what these different factions do. So we've got the Yetis over here. If you win a trick with the Yetis, you do not lead the next trick. That's it. Very simple, very straightforward, and again, plenty of foiling and very cute illustrations in here. So this is a nice faction, a very simple one to shuffle in, especially if you're playing with new players, because it does have that nice foiling. It's going to be eye-catching, but it's a really easy rule to follow. And I love breaking runs when someone leads and they just continue keeping that lead because the other player doesn't have a suit. I like that these guys will then break that up and say, okay, now pass the baton. These over here, the Frost Beasts, if you, in Phase 2, when you're scoring, if you win with any of these, then the other card goes away. I'm fairly certain. Let me make sure I'm phrasing that correctly. Yeah, in Phase 2, if you win a trick with this card, the other card is discarded and not collected into your score pile. So, interesting. I'm always a little hesitant of cards, or factions, I should say, that nuke the score pile, because I think the score pile is already very small. And when it ends up going to a lot of tiebreakers and all that, it feels a little cheaper, right? But these are not bad. These are interesting. It works out well. The Ice Kings and Ice Queens is a nice idea. It's a very simple idea. Again, these go 1 through 10, or 0 through 10 rather, in the Ice Kings and the Ice Queens. If you end up at the end of the game having both the Ice King and Ice Queen of the same number, they cancel each other. The rulebook says they run away together, and you will not score them. And so, for example, let me find one here. If I have the 10 of each, the Ice King and the Ice Queen, then they are going to run away together. I like that quite a bit. I think it works out well. It does lead to a little bit of memory if your opponent is trying to mess you over, because these would be in your score pile face down. But it's a nice idea. You need to be mindful of what you take. It does nuke the score pile a little bit, and the other issue is that they are very similar, unfortunately. I have a really hard time telling these apart. There are a few visual clues. So, for example, okay, Ice Kings are these over here. and they are going to have red eyes. The Ice Queens have white eyes. The symbols are almost identical. They have little arrow tips on this one and little dots on the tips of the sort of starburst snowflake symbol on there. There's also these spikes at the bottom are straight up on one and sort of sideways on the other one. But because of the foiling, and I don't know if you can pick this up in person, some of those clues really get nuked. The foiling is so heavy-handed that it's hard to tell these apart. If they were considerably different, I would throw these into a lot of games. But it's kind of a hassle having to explain the differences to someone in two suits that should be very easy to tell apart. I don't know why one of these two, the Ice Kings or the Ice Queens, isn't not just a little different, like visually, a little visual clue to the difference, but really different. I mean, like, considerably so. And that way, I wouldn't have to worry about making that, it's sort of making my brain check for these things every time I'm playing with them. So that's how I feel about that. The artifacts I'm not going to go into. They got some nice abilities in there. Everybody gets, 3 of these and you use them throughout the game and all that. But they're good. They work out well. But that's a breakdown of everything that comes in this Frost box. There you go. Of the 3 new expansions, I would put Frost in the middle, okay? I think it's a good expansion. I think there's one better one, and I think there's one that's just not as good. Check out the videos for that. But I think Frost is pretty good. I have a couple of issues with it. I think the foiling is definitely very heavy-handed. I wish they would have dialed that back. Maybe, pick your fights. It seems like, okay, we're going with the foiling motif for this one, which is a cool idea, right? The ice thing, the foiling thing, but it's just blah. It's a little overwhelming, and I wish it was a little more subtle. Would, I think, enhance the look of the cards a bit more as well. I like the artifacts in this. I think this one avoids feeling too much like an expansion to an expansion. I think this number of artifacts is pretty good, right? You can combine it with the previous one that had the artifacts, but you don't feel like you have to. And I like that about it. Some of the other expansions in this new line definitely feel like they are expansions to expansions. And that's a problem, because then you're asking people to really, dive deep and make this a more of a niche sort of box. And this one I think you can pick up, if you like it, without having picked up the first round of expansions, The characters themselves, I think, are, the different factions, are nice. They work well. Though I would be hesitant to include a lot of these in the same game, because that foiling is so strong that it's going to demand more careful visual acuity from you. You need to be then more discerning. If you're playing with both the Frost Beasts and Yetis, then you got to make sure you separate them in your hand. You got to be a little more careful with that. I would probably include one of these cool-looking frosted suits, and then the rest can just be whatever suits from other expansions. And that would be a nice visual flair, but won't create any confusion, which is my main problem with this, actually. I really like the Ice Kings and Ice Queens, but man, they're so close. They're just too similar looking. And that's a problem. The symbols are very close. They probably looked good in Photoshop, right? I mean, they probably were fine. And then they got foiled, and a lot of that detail, a lot of that definition gets buried under this shiny layer, and I have a problem with that. There's no good reason for them to be that close, visually. One of them could have a big giant red flash behind them. I mean, like something not subtle. There's subtle clues. I want something not subtle to tell them apart. When you have the other combined suits like orcs and elves or whatever it is, they're not close at all. This doesn't need to be this similar, and I would have appreciated it more. Now, my favorite in here is probably, besides those two, I really like them, but I won't always throw them in, if I have to explain to people, hey, look, this is what you want to watch out for. Red eyes, spikies. If you hold them next to each other, the edges are a little bit different, so watch out for that. There's also a slight red glare behind the number that is incredibly hard to tell apart. So like these two would be, can you even see that? The 2 6s. One of them has a little bit of a red behind the number and the other one doesn't. It's too subtle. It's too hard to tell apart. If you stop and look and you go, okay, these have the spikes up. That's the king, right? No, spikes up are here. Spikes up, red eyes, that's the king. This is the queen. Okay, but I don't want to have to take that long to do that. So the one I usually throw in then is the Yetis. I do like the Yetis. I think that's cool. That when you win, you don't go again. The other player now leads. That's a nice idea. But overall, I like the artifacts, but I think the factions in here feel aren't that exciting. They don't feel very bombastic or twisty or engaging. They're like, okay, sure, more factions is nice, I guess. That's how these feel in many ways. I don't dislike it. I think these are well thought out. None of them are too weird, right? Which is also another trap where they're so bizarre you just never end up putting them in there. But overall, I think the foiling thing is a neat idea, not handled in the absolute best way. And I think the artifacts, I'm glad that they went through the trouble of giving the player that many. And it's not just, hey, here's 4 more artifacts so you can buy the other expansion and combine them in there. All right. So for me, this one is going to get a 6 out of 10. Like I said, this is my middle one. There's one I like more, one I like less. And I would not hesitate to recommend this one, especially if you feel like I'm overblowing the whole foiling thing. Go for it. It's attractive. It's well made. It's got a cool theme. I love Yetis, right? That's neat. And the having another dual faction that you always need one of in your game is good. They gotta put some more of those out there, or allow for the rules not to use them. So yeah, 6 out of 10 from me. We're definitely getting to the point of diminishing returns with Claim. There are a lot of factions out there, but this is still fun, and it's one I would still say, yeah, you know what, you've bought most everything else, you want some more, go ahead and pick this one up. So there you go, everybody. Like I said, I'm doing all 3 of these, so make sure that you come back and check them all out, see what I think of them. All right, I am Z Garcia. I'll see you on the next one.